Dear students, welcome to EPG Padashala. In the paper Nutrition Through Lifespan, the one of the important module is on nutrition in pregnancy. The stages of gestation is being dealt in this module. Pregnancy can be a very special time for a couple. Along with the responsibility of shaping a child's health and personality comes from the prospective exploration of watching the child development and growth. These parents often feel an overriding desire to produce a healthy baby, which opens them to a new nutrition and health information. The parents to be usually wants to have everything possible to maximize their chances of having a robust, a lively newborn. Producing a healthy baby is not just a matter of luck. True, some aspects of fetal and newborn health care are beyond the parent's control. Still, a conscious decision about the social, health and nutrition factors significantly affects the baby's health and the future. The parents relates directly to the livelihood of having a healthy newborn. Then, choosing to breastfeed the infant adds a further benefit. Healthy family planning of the fetus starts from the very first day of gestation, so the parents have to take extra care and attention towards during this period. Keeping this in mind, the following are the objectives of the module: to understand the concept and the stages of gestation and to understand the aspects of prenatal life. Now I am going to explain the very important stages of every human individual being. Now I am going to explain the very important aspects of every individual human being. Able to guess what it could be? Yes, it is on the puberty and mensuration. Puberty is the time in life when a boy or a girl becomes sexually mature. It is a process that usually happens between the age of 10 to 14 years for girls and 12 to 16 years for boys. Let us move on to the important process of the girl's life is the mensuration. This is a process of passing off the lining of the uterus is called a mensuration, and the time from the beginning of the one menstrual period to the onset to the next is usually 28 days. Let us recollect how mensuration happens. On the first day, mensuration occurs while the various hormones activate the formation of the egg in the ovary. From the 6th to 13th day, the egg continues to be formed while the lining of the uterus is being prepared to receive it. On the 14th day, the egg is being released from the ovary. From the 15th to 18th day, if the egg is fertilized or fertile, it implants itself to the wall of the uterus. In case if the egg is not fertilized, the blood vessels in the wall of the uterus shrinks, becomes oxygen deprived and break down. So the mensuration begins again, the cycle repeats. Now we are going to discuss in detail about the reproduction. Here in this slide you can see how the reproduction takes place in the male as well as in female. For reproduction cycle, a cell is very important. The cell is the basic unit of the structure of the living things. The cells that do similar work together to form a tissue. This tissue in turn forms an organs, certain body parts that have a special structure and do a special work. The female reproduce egg cell, which is known as the oocyte or ovum, which is the largest in the human cell. Here you are going to see how the ovum or the oocyte looks. It measures about 0.1 to 0.2 mm and it is just visible to the naked eye. As I mentioned earlier, it is the largest cell. It is also a roundest cell. Therefore, it has the largest volume in relation to its surface. The cell consists of large amount of the cytoplasm in which the nucleus is dissolved and therefore invisible until just before consumption. The one ovum is worth as much as the million of the sperm. One sperm cell is nothing, one ovum determines everything. The male reproductive system functions to produces the sperm cell. The sperm cell are the smallest human cells there are no more than the nucleus with a small amount of the cytoplasm, some mitochondria, as the mitochondria is the energy suppliers to the cell and it has a long tail. They have hardly any content and are a straightest cell. So the ovum develops in the warm condition whereas the sperm develops in a cold condition. Testosterone causes the testis to begin to producing the ovum. That is the hormone which helps to produce the sperm. Once the male reaches the puberty, he is capable of producing the sperm for the rest of his life. Unlike the male reproductive organs, most of the female reproductive organs are internal. The major parts of the female reproductive systems are the ovaries, the fallopian tubes, the uterus and the vagina. The female reproductive system produces the egg that will develop into a new human life and it provides the nourishment and protection necessary for the fertilized egg cell to develop into a fully formed baby. Here you can see how fertilization and implantation take place inside the uterus. The entire body system begins as one cell, so tiny that one can be viewed only through the highly powered microscope. The first cell has been formed by the union of the egg cell from the mother and the sperm cell from the father that take place in the fallopian tubes. The male cell that unites with the female egg cell, it forms a fertilized egg cell. Now we are going to discuss about how the embryo form. In humans, the developing uterus offspring from about the beginning of the 3rd week at the end of the 8th week after consumption. Have you heard about zygote? Yes, zygote is a genetic material of the egg and the sperm combined to form one cell. Here you can see the implantation is very in early stage of pregnancy at which the conception adheres to the wall of the uterus. At this stage of the prenatal development, the egg is known as a blastocytes. The blastocytes will be attached to one of the wall in the upper part to the 1/3 of the uterus. Implantation of the fertilized ovum is most likely to occur about 9th days after the ovulation, ranging between 6th to 12th days. Once the implantation has happened, a woman is said to be pregnant. Let us look into the stages of prenatal life. Fertilization occurs when the sperm from the male pierces the cell wall of an ovum from the female. Ovum is also named as the egg. Once the ovum is fertilized, it begins to grow. At the first, the fertilized ovum, which is also called as a zygote, consists as only one cell. After a few hours, the zygote is divided into 2 new cells. Till later, each of these 2 new cells will also again divided. The first important period is called as a ovum. The first 2 weeks from the time of consumption till the zygote is attached within the uterus is the period of ovum. Consumption occurs in the fallopian tube and the zygote travels down to the uterus. This specific process of attachment of the ovum to the uterine wall is called as the implantation. Here the ovum or the egg cell from which the fetus eventually develops if the egg is being fertilized by the sperm cell. The second period is known as the period of embryo. The period of embryo begins from the time of the zygote's attachment to the uterus wall till birth. The conceptions include the extra embryonic membrane as well as the embryo or the fetus. This period usually lasts from 2 weeks after fertilization to the 8th week. In this stage, the lining of the gastrointestinal tract, the trachea, bronchitis, lungs, liver, pancreas, salivary glands, thyroid glands and thymus are developed. Nutrients from the mother blood passes to the fetus through the placenta. Also, a sac develops filled with the watery fluid which is called as the amniotic fluid, which act as a buffer to protect the embryo from the shocks experienced by the mother. Most important organ develops in the uterus during pregnancy is the placenta. The placenta provides nourishment and oxygen from the mother's blood are transferred to the fetus and the fetal waste are being removed to the mother's body. Some refer to this after birth because it is being excreted from the body following the birth of the baby. The placenta also releases the hormones to maintain the pregnant state. The most substances are passed from the mother through the placenta to the baby. The next important fluid is the amniotic fluid. As the name indicates fluid, it is a watery substances that surrounds the growing fetus during its time in the womb. The amniotic fluids helps to cushion the baby from the outside forces. Have you heard about the terminology amniocentesis? It is nothing but the medical procedure used for prenatal diagnosis in which a small amount of amniotic fluid is extracted from the amniotic fluid around the developing fetus. It is usually offered when there may be an increased risk for genetic defects in pregnancy. Early amniocentesis can be performed as early as 13th week of gestation. The standard amniocentesis is usually performed between 15th to 20th weeks of gestation. Yet another important organ for the development of the fetus is an umbilical cord. It is a rope-like structure, a tube that connects the embryo to the placenta. The placenta carries the nutrients and oxygen to the baby and takes the waste away. The last important period of formation is the formation of the fetus. This period extends from the end of the second month of pregnancy until birth. During this time, their origin in the earlier stage become well developed and begin to function. The fetal age of 28 weeks is an important one. By this age, the child's nervous system, circulatory system and others bodily systems have become sufficiently well structured so that if newborn is a premature, it can survive. As the fetus becomes older, it becomes more active. Do you know the common signs and symptoms of pregnancy? Yes. The first signs of pregnancy is usually a mist of menstrual period. Morning sickness or nausea is another sign of pregnancy. Feeling urinate frequently, changes in the breast, enlargement of the nipples and the area around the nipples become very dark. It is quite interesting to know about how the development of the fetus that happens inside the mother's womb. Here in this slide, you are watching the development of the fetus inside the mother's womb. The cell that composes of the inner layer of the embryo develops into a baby. The outer layer of the cells develops into the placenta, the blood-rich tissues that transfer the oxygen and the nutrients from the mother's blood to the embryo. The placenta begins to form 2 or 3 days after implantation. The nourishment passes from the placenta through the umbilical cord to the embryo. The umbilical cord connects the embryo to the placenta. The amniotic sac also forms at this time. And this sac has been filled with a transparent fluid that acts as a shock absorber for the embryo and insulates it against the temperature change. After 2 months, the developing individual is called as a fetus. At this time, all the vital organs have started to develop. In this slide, you can see how the stages of gestation take place. By the end of the first month, the embryo is about 1/4 inch long. The heart, the brain, lungs are begin to form and the heart starts beating on about 25th day. At the end of the second month, the embryo is about 1.5 inches long and the muscle skins begin to develop in this stage. Arms, hands, fingers are formed. Leg begins to form along with the knees, ankles and toes. Every vital organ starts to develop in this stage. At the end of the third month, the fetus reaches about 3 inches long and weighs about 28.3 grams. The pregnant women can feel the movement of the baby. The baby can open and close the mouth and able to swallow. Now we are going to see what happens in the end of the 4th month. The fetus attain 8 to 10 inches of height and 169.8 grams of weight. At the end of the 5th month, the height is about 30 centimeter and weighs about 453.6 grams. In this stage, the eyelashes and the nails are formed. The heartbeat of the baby can be heard. At the end of the 6th month, the fetus is able to kick and cry. The baby recognizes the sounds and can even hiccup. The finger and the footprints are being formed. End of the 7th month, the fetus weighs about 907 grams. Now the fetus can freely move the arms and the legs and blinking the eyes. By the end of the 8th month, the fetus attains about 16.5 inches in height and weighs about 4 pounds in weight. The hair gets longer, the skin gets smoother as the layer of the fat develops under it. Now we are going to see what happens at the end of the 9th month. The growth of the fetus is about 45 to 50 centimeter and weighs about 3,175 to 4,000 grams. The organs are fully developed and inner function their own. The fetus is now called as a developing human from the start of the 9th month, the pregnancy until delivery. Have you heard about the word trimester? The trimester is the word that is being normally used in pregnancy. Here the months are being equally divided into 3. The first trimester, here the formation of the human organ begins when the egg and the sperm unite to form the zygote. The process of the cell division takes place after 30 hours of consumption. The entire genetic code is being passed to every cell, but each cell utilizes only a segment of the code to produces the protein. By the end of 13th weeks, the first trimester, most organs are formed and the fetus can move. The women should avoid substances that may harm the developing fetus, especially during the first trimester. The second trimester, by the beginning of the second trimester, the fetus weighs about 1 pound and the arms, the hands, legs, feet, toes are fully formed. During the second trimester, the mother's breast weight increases by approximately 30% due to the deposition of 3 to 4 pounds of fat for lactation. The last period is the third trimester. By the beginning of the third trimester, the fetus weighs about 2 to 3 pounds. The fetus will double in the length and multiple its weight by 5 times. In order to visualize the embryo or the fetus, its mother's uterus or the womb, and to check the growth of the fetus, the ultrasound is being used. The procedure is often a standard part of the prenatal care as it yields the variety of information regarding the health of the mother and of the fetus as well as regarding the process of pregnancy. When the fetus is fully developed, the labor or the natural birth will happen. The culmination of the human pregnancy with the emergence of the newborn infants from the mother's uterus starts, and that process is called as a labor or a natural birth. Natural birth, which is the most common when the baby is delivered through the vagina. By the 9th month, the baby turns to the face head down in the uterus. The birth process begins with the labor pains caused by the contraction of the uterus. These contractions shortens the muscles of the uterus and begins to pull the cervix and the neck of the uterus open. So far, I had explained how the natural birth takes place. The next important and interesting concept is the stages of birth. In this slide, you can watch how 3 stages of birth take place. The first stage, from the 9th month, the cervix held tightly shut, keeping the baby inside the uterus. Now, it must open to the diameter about 5 inches to allow the baby to pass through. That is named as a dilation or opening of the cervix is the first, and usually the longest stage of the birth process. The first step is the journey towards the childbirth lasts for an average about 6 to 10 hours for the first time of pregnant mother, but it can be much shorter in the second pregnancy. The second stage, now we are going to see what happens in the second stage. Here the baby passes through the vagina and out of the mother. This process is when a serious preparation of work for the childbirth begins and when most of the women begins to labor more intensively. It can last for an average about 3 to 6 hours for the first babies and about half that can be subsequently less for the next delivery. The last stage is the third stage. The uterus contract to expel the placenta is called as afterbirth. The final process of the first stage can last for 20 minutes to 2 hours for the first babies and may quite quickly in subsequent births. Now, let us look into the next aspect of successful pregnancy. To define a successful pregnancy, one common criterion is the protection of the mother's physical and emotional health so that she can turn to her pre-pregnancy health status. As for the infant, two widely accepted criteria are the gestation period longer than 37 weeks, a birth weight greater than 2.5 kg, sufficient lung development which is likely to have occurred by 37 weeks gestation is critical to survival of a newborn. Longer the gestation, greater the ultimate birth weight and maturation, and hence fewer medical problems are likely to occur. Now we are going to see about the low birth weight. The low birth weight infants, those weighing less than 2.5 kg at birth. The most commonly low birth weight associate with preterm birth. The full term and the preterm infants who weighs less than the expected weight for this duration of gestation and result for sufficient growth and described as a small for gestational age, which is named as SGA. Thus, the full term infant weighing less than 2.5 kg at birth is SGA, small for gestation age, but not a preterm. Whereas a preterm infant born at 30 weeks gestation will probably be a low birth weight without SGA. The infant who are small for gestation age are more likely than the normal weight infants who have a medical complications including the problems with blood glucose control, temperature regulation, the growth and development in the early weeks after birth. The newborn's quality of life must also be considered in rating the success of pregnancy. Overall, the prospective parent should strive towards producing a baby who is born healthy, on time, and with the mental, physical, and psychological capabilities to take advantage of whatever life offers while also protecting the mother's health. Nutrition is one key of a successful pregnancy. Eating a healthy food is a vital during the pregnancy to ensure the health of both offspring and to the mother. The fetal organs and the body part begins to develop very soon after consumption. Again, the first trimester is especially a critical period when poor nutrition or drugs used can result in birth defects. To summarize this module, pregnancy and birth can be a very special time in the life of the women. The 9th month of the pregnancy as well as the labor and delivery are filled with many physical and physiological changes as well as changes in the lifestyle. Each challenges that can be met successfully when the woman shares her feelings and experiences with the partner or the other supportive person and with her physician, nurse and or a childbirth educator. The importance of health care throughout the pregnancy is emphasized because a proper health care increases the livelihood of the health of the mother as well as the healthy baby. Many references, particularly in human relations areas, the files describes the cultural variation in beliefs about pregnancy and the birth with an associated behaviors.